In the latest Bill Cosby news, his lawyers want the trial moved out of suburban Philadelphia. His team is arguing that there has been widespread negative press coverage for his sexual assault case. They said Cosby has been the target of an inflammatory and prejudicial smear campaign, and that news outlets have labeled him as a monster and sociopath. Lawyers filed a motion and asked that the trial be moved out of Montgomery County or bring in an outside jury. This Friday marks the one-year anniversary since Cosby was charged with aggravated sexual assault. His felony trial is slated for June of 2017.
Okay, Tommy, you being around and knowing all this stuff, why do you think the defense team is looking to move this trial? Everybody knows Bill Cosby, I'm sure of that. What do you think some of the strategy behind this is?
Well, I'm not part of the defense team, so I don't have access to the information they have. I have to assume they hired a jury consultant to do some studies, focus groups, phone surveys, studies of attitudes in that community. And, I have to also assume that they are concerned with the fact that the current district attorney who's prosecuting Bill Cosby ran on a platform that if elected, he would go after Bill Cosby. So if you do some analysis of the kind of coverage there's been on the news stations, on talk shows, et cetera, in the print media, on the internet, and you take into account that, this political campaign run by the DA was focused around going after Bill Cosby, they may have a very valid point that this community in particular is far more prejudiced than any other community could possibly be. Yes, it's going to be argued by the prosecution, who probably don't want to change a venue, that everyone's heard of the case, everyone has access to these media sources. But I suspect if you look at the local news reporting, print, TV, internet, social media, you'll find that it's pretty prejudiced against him. So I suspect the defense has a valid point. It's interesting because it brings back all memories of the Michael Jackson case when we were trying it in Santa Maria, which is northern Santa Barbara County, and everybody was thinking we're going to want to change a venue. And I had never tried a case in Santa Barbara County before. It's north of Los Angeles County where I live and practice. And I spent a lot of time up there alone talking to people to try and get a feel for just what the attitudes about Michael Jackson were. And I also found out that that part of Santa Barbara County had on a number of occasions tried to secede from South Santa Barbara County, where Tom Sneddon, the DA, had his main office. So, I had a jury consultant who I largely didn't listen to. I followed my own instincts, and my instincts were that this community was very independent-minded, very libertarian in spirit. I think their attitude was, we follow the law. But government don't go too much into our private lives. We're good people. We don't want you interfering with everything we do. And I also realized that Michael Jackson hired people at Neverland. He had about 100 employees. And that the general feeling about him during the few times anyone saw him was rather favorable. So I decided that I would do well just staying put. And I remember reporter Diane Dimon, who was, our greatest enemy in the media at that point, she got on TV and she pointed out there was a procedure whereby if I stayed in Santa Maria, I could ask for some jurors to be shipped from Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara in South County, where Steddon's office was. And South County was thought to be much more liberal. You had the University of California at Santa Barbara. You had the wealthy patrons of the arts, a lot of entertainment people. And she was criticizing me, actually, for, in her, I forget what word she used, but being foolish enough not to take advantage of that procedure and bring some so-called liberal jurors from South County up north. And what she didn't know was that there was a lot of pride among people in northern Santa Barbara County. And I felt that if I asked to bring some jurors up from South County, that would be perceived as somewhat of an insult or a lack of confidence in the community. So I stayed put despite lots of criticism, and fortunately it worked. But I have to assume Bill Cosby's lawyers know what they're doing and are quite concerned that the coverage has been so prejudicial that they just can't get an independent and fair-minded jury.
And another argument that's been going on is the alleged so-called other accusers. They're talking about 10, there's rumors 10 to 13. What goes into a unbiased judge of how you let that type of evidence in from a judge's unbiased standpoint?
Well, again, I don't practice in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has its own rules. I actually consulted a lawyer who went to law school in Pennsylvania and college. And has a lot of friends who practice there, and she told me that there's a very good chance this judge might let all 13 alleged victims, alleged accusers, testify. That the laws in Pennsylvania are very pro-prosecution when it comes to this type of evidence. You may recall in the Michael Jackson case, the prosecution wanted to bring in a number of so-called similar act, accusers, and the judge allowed them to bring in evidence that 5 other young men had been molested by Michael Jackson. So that kind of evidence tends to be very, very detrimental to the defense because, you're not being charged for allegedly, raping or molesting or assaulting, these other people. But nevertheless, if you parade a bunch in, a jury may actually confuse what the underlying charges are with what they think went on in similar situations. So it tends to